Can you see the record on, Lynn?
It's on, Joseph.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't find my mute button.
No, that's okay.
Here. Sue's quicker than I am.
Yeah.
Sorry, still sympathetic dominant.
Yeah. Well, good morning, everyone in the Pacific time zone and Mountain time zone, and good afternoon to all of you in the Central and Eastern time zone. This is Joseph Antel from Adjuvant Protocols for Healing. On Thursdays, as you know, I'm teaching every other Thursday, the first and third Thursday of the month now, on my new book, Adjuvant Protocols for Healing. And the second and fourth Tuesdays at 8 a.m. on the second and fourth Tuesday. As you know, the long-awaited, I think it was last November, I started promising you this, the long-awaited YouTube channel, and Lynn put the link in the chat box. Of course, you can always email me if you need the link, or you can just go to youtube.com and just type in Joseph Antel, and it's as simple as that. And these have, I'll open the link for you. Not all have been downloaded, my back lectures, webinars on Adjuvant Protocols for Healing, my book, and the notes that go with it. There'll be 20 or 21 now after today in all. So there's quite a few for you to enjoy and gain more knowledge. And of course, if any of you don't have my book, I would certainly love for you to have my book, which is a key to clinical referencing and being able to look up and access many of the things that I teach. As you know, I've been doing a series on the heart. We've looked at stroke and TIAs a few weeks ago. And we looked at, 2 weeks ago, we looked at congestive heart failure and broken heart syndrome. And today we're going to look at arrhythmias, which is really in the baby boomer generation is probably the greatest challenge. I didn't look up what percentage or how many are challenged with this over 60 years old, but it is many, many people. Most heart conditions, this goes along with it. So we're going to look today at arrhythmias in general, and then fibrillation, which is an arrhythmia in general, and specific challenge that some have of the heart being too fast and the heart being too slow. Of course, as I always emphasize to you, we are not cardiologists. We're not medical professionals. Some of you are in the medical professions, and that's great. We need that. Our work is to provide clinical observation and nutritional application. Remember that the algorithm I use is malnutrition, inflammation, disease. And so our work is to complement, to play an adjunctive part with the medical profession, because all of us and all of our clients are working with that reality too, that whole area related to human health. So ours is to dance with it, to complement, to be okay with it, and provide what they are not either capable or medical science or do not acknowledge. None of that matters. What matters is what we do. So today, if we look at arrhythmias, we have to understand a little bit about why this occurs, how it occurs, and what can be done about it. Now, this is a page from my book, and you can see that, as most of you already know, that I always list products in their order of importance. So if a client comes in and they say, I have arrhythmias, you'd like to help them, you don't have a heart sound recorder, you can't actually see what may be more specifically applied to that client, then you can use the book as your guide. This is your compass to get started, to create that foundation, to establish a control and balance. And of course, we'll get into these products. As we have seen with strokes and all of the heart challenges that people have, you will see that the core, this true foundation from a nutritional perspective, is cardiotrophin, cataplex B. Not always in that, usually cardiotrophin is first, which we've discussed at length in my other lectures, which you can listen to, and cataplex B core as well. So I'd like you to listen, this is about 3.5 minutes long, to understand, if we're going to understand arrhythmias, we have to understand how the rhythm, the perfect pattern of how the heart functions, how electrical conduction actually manifests in a balanced way in the mammalian species of the world, animals, humans. And I looked through several. This is the best one. And I think I saw Ray on today. You don't have to unmute yourself yet, but I think she will enjoy this. I always look to her as a cardiovascular nurse for her entire career, how I'm doing. She's my checkpoint. So enjoy this next 3.5 minutes.
Atera includes everything MSPs and IT pros need in one easy-to-use.
The cardiac conduction system consists of the following components: the sinoatrial node, or SA node, located in the right atrium near the entrance of the superior vena cava. This is the natural pacemaker of the heart. It initiates all heartbeat and determines heart rate. Electrical impulses from the SA node spread throughout both atria and stimulate them to contract. The Atrioventricular Node, or AV node, located on the other side of the right atrium near the AV valve. The AV node serves as electrical gateway to the ventricles. It delays the passage of electrical impulses to the ventricles. This delay is to ensure that the atria have ejected all the blood into the ventricles before the ventricles contract. The AV node receives signals from the SA node and passes them onto the atrioventricular bundle, AV bundle, or bundle of His. This bundle is then divided into right and left bundle branches, which conduct the impulses toward the apex of the heart. The signals are then passed onto Purkinje fibers, turning upward and spreading throughout the ventricular myocardium. Electrical activities of the heart can be recorded in the form of electrocardiogram, ECG, or EKG. An ECG is a composite recording of all the action potentials produced by the nodes and the cells of the myocardium. Each wave or segment of the ECG corresponds to a certain event of the cardiac electrical cycle. When the atria are full of blood, the SA node fires, electrical signals spread throughout the atria and cause them to depolarize. This is represented by the P wave on the ECG. Atrial contraction, or atrial systole, starts about 100 milliseconds after the P wave begins. The PQ segment represents the time the signals travel from the SA node to the AV node. The QRS complex marks the firing of the AV node and represents ventricular depolarization. Q wave corresponds to depolarization of the interventricular septum. R wave is produced by depolarization of the main mass of the ventricles. S wave represents the last phase of ventricular depolarization at the base of the heart. Atrial repolarization also occurs during this time, but the signal is obscured by the large QRS complex. The ST segment reflects the plateau in the myocardial action potential. This is when the ventricles contract and pump blood. The T wave represents ventricular repolarization immediately before ventricular relaxation or ventricular diastole. The cycle repeats itself with every heartbeat.
So I hope you enjoyed that. The heart is truly magnificent because that cycle, that work and rest cycle, happens 100,000 times a day in a 24-hour period in the average size human being, of course. And the unique and marvelous nature of the heart could be described, that uniqueness, as it does something that no other cell in the body does. It beats. How does this happen? Well, a lot of they've got it figured out, and of course you can study this and open this up and read more about it if you're curious, as I am. But no other muscle in the body, those cells in that muscle beat onto themselves. The heartbeat does not originate in the brain. It doesn't originate anywhere but in the cells of the heart itself. And the imbalance has several different influences, which I'll discuss in a minute. But if you want to understand these unique cells, which still I am learning and don't understand fully, nor does anyone or many, but here's what they say. These unique ion cells, we may not immediately think of the heart as a collection of individual cells, but it is the complex interaction of numerous cell types. That's a key word, right? Oh, within the heart, these cells that beat under themselves, there are different cell types. And that give the heart its ability to pump blood. Some cells from the heart connective tissue. Other cells grow into the heart valves. And the muscle cells gives the heart its ability to beat and pump blood throughout the body. You can dissolve an embryonic heart into its individual cell types with trypsin, an enzyme that destroys the protein glue between the cells. Plate these cells in a dish, and you will see some cells called myocytes that beat independently. The cells shown here are from a chick embryo. I'll just read the rest of this. A single cell beats when a complex series of gates called ion channels open and close in an organized manner. Cell physiologists can measure how these ion channels work using a technique called patch clamp. I'm sorry, is it damp? Damp. As long as the beating cells do not touch one another. This is a key for us. It was a key for me to teach you and discuss this further. As long as these beating cells do not touch one another. You remember growing up eating with different families, and some of the children, the food cannot be touching the other food on the plate. Otherwise, they can't eat the meal. Well, so is the heart. These beats are independent. Some are faster, some are slower. Here's the marvel of life. Here's the marvel of the universe, as far as I'm concerned. But after 2 or 3 days, the myocytes form interconnected sheets of cells that beat in unison. Wow, what a process, huh? Open between adjacent touching cells, making their cytoplasm interconnected in these gap junctions. So a little complex, but something you may want to read over and study more. I certainly will. Because so many of you have asked me, well, Joe, what are these cells you always talk about? Well, here they are. And here is what explains what an ion is, which I'm not going to get into this anatomy. But this is how I think when I'm going to teach something, when I'm going to try to explain something to you with my limited knowledge. So what are the conditions? What are the factors that cause these arrhythmias? Now, again, I'm not going to read all of this. I always give you this homework. You should read all of this through. That's my recommendation. But we looked at the mitral valve and the mitral valve prolapse. But look, where did I see it? Oh, yes. What are the symptoms of mitral valve prolapse? So you're asking, well, Joe, start talking about arrhythmias here. Okay, here it is. Here's one big factor: mitral valve prolapse, palpitations, sensation of fast or irregular heartbeats. Why does that happen? Because that cycle, the blood is leaking back into part of the heart that it shouldn't be, causing these cells to react in a way that they're beating when they shouldn't be beating. They shouldn't, the impulses should not be doing that because of the leakage of the heart. Our most common complaint among people with mitral valve prolapse. So I'm not going to get into all that, of course. And I wanted to show you, see if I can do it real quick here. So you say, well, what does a mitral valve prolapse? Now, a lot of you that are on my heart sound recording webinars, you already know this. But for those that are new, here it is. Here is a mitral valve prolapse. Now, the heart sound recording graph interprets or observes the heart different than the EKG. That's why one of the reasons I left that second portion on. The EKG reading is very different than the heart sound recorder. This is the closing of the ventricle, the mitral and tricuspid, the lower part of the heart. That's the closing. The blood then is moving to the upper part, and then the closing of the semilunar valves. Then there's the rest period. You see this? This is the rest period where the heart literally rests twice as long as it works. So in mitral valve prolapse, you can see that you can see the three peaks. This is a ideal or normal, balanced, perfect heart closure and work and rest cycle. Work cycle, rest cycle. Work cycle, rest cycle. You can see here that that mitral valve prolapse is after the, you can see that this person's heart is strong. Looks good, except there's a loss of integrity. You see it? This can eventually lead to arrhythmic patterns in the body. Here it is. This is because the heart sound recorder graphs motion, not sound. The motion of the valve closing, the motion of blood moving when it should and shouldn't. Here it is. And you can see this. This is lub stub. See that leakage? And so again, you know, with these, I left the products in for you as well. So that's a big cause. And oops, sorry. The other cause of arrhythmias, primarily from our standpoint, what we want to look at is infection. Now, I've had different ones argue with me, not argue, but, you know, converse with me in a nice dialogue that infection is not that significant. Oh, it's very significant to the heart. And one of the main causes. Where is that here? Endocarditis is usually caused by an infection, bacteria, fungi. People with fungal overgrowths that have issues with their skin. They have candida. They have other bacterial and fungal issues. And they come in, they say, now I have problems with my heart now. Yeah. Because that infection then has gotten into the bloodstream and affected the heart. Bacteria, fungi, and other germs from another part of the body, such as the mouth. As the mouth is, potentially so is the heart. People with gum disease, we have to remember and be careful to make sure that we're checking their heart, we're giving them supplements for their heart. Spread through your bloodstream and attack the damaged areas in your heart, the vulnerable parts of the heart. If it's not treated quickly, endocarditis can damage or destroy your heart valves. That's how serious this is. So here is another major cause of arrhythmias. For endocarditis, include medications. Oh, and you can read through all of this. I don't think there was anything in here I wanted to. Other than if you've got people that, you know, are giving them, have been in the hospital under IV, if they're using catheters, any type of kidney disease that they're using, remember, it could end up problems with the heart. Women with a lot of bladder infections, men with a lot of prostate infections. This is all can lead to severe issues with the heart. This is why, what do we say from our standpoint? Well, Joe, what do we do about this? Calcium, F, vitamin C, Immuplex. Immuplex is probably the broadest scope of preventing this. And of course, good gut health, healthy gut, very crucial. But the number one that they say is brushing your teeth, flossing, keeping your gums well. Here's your vitamin C issue, which we've covered in other webinars. But people should be getting their teeth cleaned after 60 years old at least 4 times a year, at least. Smell their breath, observe their breath, look at their tongues, make sure. Because if it leads to this condition, then it's sad because we can catch it way before that begins. The other is to look at the dance between the endocrine system and the organ systems. And this comes from a book that I dearly love, Practical Endocrinology. This was back in the 1920s. Listen to what they said. This is their fledgling beginning of understanding the endocrine system. And look at what they said here, which I don't want to talk about that much, but there is some endocrinologists, medical people, they say workers, hormones are produced also by the heart, the mammary cells, the pineal, which we know. Prostate produces hormone and the spleen. Fascinating what they were looking at. Rejected now to some degree, but fascinating what they were observing, and I think they were right. But listen to this. Practical endocrinology no longer is concerned merely with the study of the ductless glands, the 7 that we know, diseases, nor with the clinical possibilities of their hormone alone, but with every active principle, with endocrine characteristics that can be used to enlarge our professional service to humanity. How wonderful. They saw this as the foundation in the control of those physiological functions that have been found to respond to these subtle hormone influences. Good for them. And I'll get to the thyroid in a second. But you can see that they were on the right track. They were seeing that the primary issue in organ function related to the communication between the organ and tissue function, and that the primary regulator of that, the primary keeper, the balancer of that is the endocrine system, which you know how much I love. And I will be teaching a class on my series, which will be on my, which is already, some of them are already in my YouTube channel, my series on the endocrine system. And what else were they looking at related to this organ endocrine relationship with the heart? Would it be arrogant if I said they knew the reason for sudden death syndrome, sudden infant death syndrome back in the 1920s? Completely rejected. Here it is. The liability to sudden death, however, is not a feature of this condition. They were picking on the thymus. On the other hand, says Morrow, the sudden death failure of the heart is the central point of the whole thymus problem. And a better term for the condition would be status cardiothymicis, which he believes to be a definite pathological entity. This guy said it's 100% that these children have certain ranges, whatever's causing it. That was still being debated, but arrhythmic patterns where the heart stops. I'll show you that in a minute. We work with that. Some of you on this line have had people with heart block where the heart starts, but it stops. He discusses the possible connection between the thymic enlargement and the cardiac failure. So that's a possibility. Why does the thymus enlarge? Of course, it is larger in children. Infection. See how it goes, all ties together? And cardiac failure, mentioning an etiological possibility, such conditions as hyperthymization, dysthymization, hormonal disharmony, and anatomical nervous theory. This is a vitamin B deficiency, probably in the mother, passed on. Or if the child then is eating, food on solid food too soon, it can affect. Fascinating, isn't it? At least I find it all very fascinating. Just, sorry. Okay, so nobody come in, please. I'm going to just mute you all out. Okay, so, and they were, when they looked at this, they had found that this relationship between the thymus and the heart was tied in with other things as well. But with arrhythmias, to return to that, even though cataplex B is the number one, when any condition is beginning to affect that rhythm of the heart, any condition, I mentioned hormonal imbalances, I mentioned infection, I mentioned, or if I didn't, the balance between the brain and the body, the autonomic nervous system. Cardiotrophin is always going to be your stabilizing influence, always. Here's what Dr. Lee said about it. Anyone that has lost tone, anyone that has a carbohydrate issue, anyone that has swelling, any type of predisposing heart failure that we looked at a couple weeks ago, and anyone that, again, has circulatory issues, you're going to need this product. This is the tried and true foundation for strengthening whatever you have in that individual's heart or your heart. That needs to be strengthened every day. That's why this is a product that should be taken at least 3 days a week, even 2 or 3, prophylactically, or in something like Cardio Plus, Vascular, that's in these other formulas. Very important. Because why? What were we saying about arrhythmias? Well, there's a hormonal factor with the thyroid. Well, what regulates the thyroid? Pituitary. And as I read last time, I'm not going to read all of this. More recently, it has been discovered that the heart also secretes oxytocin by the pituitary, commonly referred to as the love or bonding hormone. In addition to its functions in childbirth and lactation, do you see what I just read you about children? Could this also have an influence? The heart itself. Should the mother be on if they're concerned about sudden infant death syndrome? Yes. Put them on Cardio Plus. Put them on Cardiotrophin. Give them something with pituitary. In addition to its functions in childbirth and lactation, recent evidence indicates that this hormone is also involved with cognition, tolerance. Now, when I've read this, because I've read this a lot to you, I've read it thinking of the person in the outer world. Think of this in relationship to the body, inwardly itself. Oh, it's involved with the intelligence of my body inside, of the body, of tolerance within my body, adaptation, sexual and maternal behaviors. A lot of people have trouble with that right now. A lot. Being alone. Learning social cues and the establishment of enduring pair bonds, i.e., loving one another. This is the hormone. And it's secreted by the heart. In fact, concentrations of oxytocin in the heart were found to be as high as those found in the brain, the pituitary. So these messengers, and the original endocrinologist, Dr. Lee, was right. The heart is an endocrine gland. It secretes hormones. This was found not till 1983 that they start to acknowledge it. And of course, a key player going back to Chinese medicine is the thyroid itself. What is their algorithm? For thousands of years, thyroid rules heart, heart rules kidney. All of this ties in with these arrhythmias. Because if there is not the communication from within the heart to the body, and from the body to back to the endocrine system, and that interplay, that dance between the two, then that process that I read to you about these heart cells that can't touch each other, but then must work together. And some of these cells that beat within themselves keep the balance of beating slower, and some beating faster, depending on the information from the rest of the body. And that's why, so maybe you're thinking, well, Joe, why is the thyroid so significant? Because the thyroid is the governor of metabolic function, of the life force within the body that affects the heart. And in turn, the heart affects the life force. Key player. And look, I just want you to see what Dr. Lee said in relationship to the heart. And that's why I put this in. This is one of my most beloved books, the Products Bulletin. You will learn more from this and in the Therapeutic Food Manual. Of course, my book is an updated version of that collection and my clinical experience. But you've got to go back to the original teachers because they were correct. All the newfangled, ways of approaching through reductionism, we would all be perfectly well if they worked. We have to return to what originally did work and does work. Look at the first thing that he says about this imbalance in the thyroid. Now, this may not be Graves' disease. This may not be hyperthyroidism, but an imbalance. Tachycardia. Here it is. Tremors. And so on. And so what do other people say? Patients who had high levels of thyroid hormone within the normal range. That's what I just was saying. Oh, no, you don't have Graves' disease. You're fine. Your hormones are a little high. You're not fine. Were found to have increased risk of developing atrial fibrillation. That's that upper part of the heart. Remember we saw in the video that I showed you? Because the heart has to sleep. age, gender, and whether the patient had heart disease to begin with. Had no impact, Forget genes, forget the person's age. If the endocrine system is not right. And why isn't the thyroid right? Because the pituitary isn't right. Why is the pituitary not right? Because the pineal isn't right. And you can listen to my other lectures to get into that more. On the other hand, subclinical hypothyroidism did not increase the risk. So lowered thyroid, but I would argue with that. The study suggests that higher levels of thyroid hormone, even within in a normal range, increases the risk of developing AFib. However, it is not known whether any treatment is indicated or if treatment would affect this risk. Well, our care, by observing, by looking at heart graphs, by getting the right blood work for the endocrine system, especially the thyroid, can save a lot of time and a lot of suffering, a lot. So what is the what is the medical science doing the best they can? We have to work with them. That's what we do. What do? Well, they work with things like cardioversion. Cardioversion is a procedure used to return an abnormal heartbeat to normal rhythm. I have a supplement for that. It's called Cataplex B Core. Get into that in a second. This procedure is used when the heart is beating very fast or irregular. This is called an arrhythmia. But look at the symptoms, though. Where is it? Yeah. Less dangerous abnormal rhythms. Temporary low blood pressure, heart damage, heart failure, skin damage, dislodged blood clots. Listen, we can't tell people not to have these things. It's not our scope of practice. But we can provide them with the nutrients that they need that complements what they're doing. Now, of course, the client has to be willing to work with you, of course. Here's another one that they use. Cardiac ablation is ablation works by scanning or destroying tissue in your heart that triggers or sustains an abnormal heart rhythm. Well, how do they know? They just go in and they burn parts of the heart that are, remember I said, some of the cells inherently beat fast, some of them beat slow. It's a guessing game, unfortunately for them. What can happen during this procedure? Bleeding or infection, damage to blood vessels. Remember, when they do an ablation, those cells never return to normalcy. Whether they actually reestablish or not, I doubt it. Puncture to the heart, damage to the heart valves, damage to the electrical system. Oh, I really want this technique. Blood clots, stroke, narrowing of the veins, damage to your kidneys, death in rare cases. And of course, which I'm not going to go into, is the pacemaker. What about giving nutrition that really is, that helps assist the natural pacemaking ability of the heart itself? So you can read about these. So let's look at some of these. Now, these are all real people. These are all graphs that I've taken over the last, I've been doing this project for 7 years now. I'm in my 8th year, started 2013. But you can see that some people have this slowing of the heart. This is not natural. This is a specific mineral imbalance and vitamin imbalance. Easily corrected. Or some people are too fast. We talked about the atrial fibrillation. When the heart should be resting, in both of the rest periods, the systolic rest period, or interval it's called now, or the diastolic rest period, you should not have anything looking like this, because the heart must rest, sleep, recuperate, regain its balance between those cells twice as long as it works. Twice as long. That's the beauty of nature. Oh, I'm going to make you do something 100,000 times a day, but you're going to sleep, rest, do nothing twice as long as you work. And again, this is simply a specific mineral deficiency and vitamin deficiency, which we'll get into here. What about, he talked about that bundle of His, that signal coming down from the AV node, from the SA node, no, from the AV node, I'm sorry, from the AV node down and branching to both sides of the heart. Well, what happens if that electrical current is not going to each side equally? This is what the graph looks like. Easily detected. We've looked at, I was going to say hundreds, but we've looked at thousands of these now. What about other indication that something is wrong? If the rhythm is wrong, if the heart is not correct, there is something else going on with that person. Endocrine imbalance, infection, autonomic imbalance between the brain and the body, not good communication, or malnutrition itself is really at the core of all of these things. This is called a Kentucky pattern, S1, S2, S3. This is the beginning signs of heart failure. An arrhythmical pattern that is screaming at you, at the clinician to correct. And then, of course, as I said, we talked about that heart block itself. When that signal is coming down and it's not getting to the other side. But you could say, well, Joe, look, it is. I can see it on the other side. I know. Because one side then gets the other side moving. It literally gives it the other side CPR, so to speak. This is the true heart block, or all of these extra beats. And of course, we really looked at this of mitral valve prolapse or incompetence in that valve causing arrhythmias. Now, here's a case I believe Lynn worked with, and you can see that, let's just open this up and look at this. Oops. "48-year-old, last 2 weeks having a hard time breathing." Well, if your heart stops, everyone, you have a hard time breathing. Not consistent with taking Hawthorne. Well, we'll talk about that in a minute. Has been out for 2 weeks. Cardiotrophin B, phosphfood, adrenal complex, chlorophyll. Did not take any supplements 2 days prior to the testing. Well, that's okay. I mean, you know, you're getting a really good picture. And then after this was, I think that this was the one that she took quite a while to come back. This was 2016. And yeah, this was March, and she came back in September taking these products. But you can see, what are the two things based on what I just said? Oh, the Kentucky pattern is starting. You can see it. And then really either a very long rest period or heart block itself. And that's not necessarily, we don't need to necessarily know that. Though if this continues in these graphs, or this continues, you need to refer them out. Especially if you've done the nutrition and it hasn't seen the recovery that you want to see. But obviously, look at this work to rest ratio, almost perfect now. And so the pattern here of the imbalance in the heart is always important to get people back in. But I think this person lived far away, so they only came back quarterly to the practitioner. And I already talked about again, another case of the double, the Kentucky pattern. Lub, dub, dub. Kentucky, not a good sign. This was a paper by Dr. Lee that, of course, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but he was talking about the B4 factor, which many at his time rejected him about in relationship to. Many of his time said no such thing. But he proved it then, we prove it now. Thiamine hydrochloride, B1 alone, without its inherent partner, the B4 factor, it does not work. The devastating effects of vitamin B4 deficiency are so well known. One of the first noticed and most important effects of this avitaminosis is bradycardia, slowing. So prevalent among beriberi sufferers. Beriberi is a Sinhalese word meaning I can't. Dropsy, it used to be called. It's a B4 deficiency. B1 won't touch it. Harris claims that the cardiac defect is due to an excess of lactic acid. You get all these people, and when you get people, ask them about their exercise patterns. Oh, I can only exercise so long. I get terrible side effects after I've exercised. So I have to, I can only walk twice a week. That's the sign. That's telling you they're getting lactic acid, or they bike and they say, oh, I'm sore all over in my muscles. That's where the lactic acid builds up. That's a sign of a B4 deficiency. Tremors. How many people you observe shaking, facial tremors, shaking their knees, their legs restless at night, extra systoles, extra beats, skip beats, fibrillation, bundle branch block, we just showed you that, arrhythmias, and heart block. These phenomena are usually due to a loss of conductivity of the heart tissue for the impulses that otherwise maintain synchronism and a contractile rhythm of the heart muscle. Heart block usually starts, I didn't want to read all of this. The cause is a deficiency of the serial germ factors B4 in particular. This fraction of the B complex is essential to normal function of the motor nerves. It has also been called the anti-paralysis factor, right? Beriberi, I can't. When animals are deprived of their hindquarters tend to drag, the condition often being corrected within minutes after the ingestion of extracts containing B4. It is inseparable from natural thiamine, never found in synthetic thiamine. And Dr. Lee says it again here. This is why, everyone, all the B vitamins that people take from the health food store, from the pharmacy, from online companies, They only have the B1. They're made in a laboratory. They're not made by nature. This was at a naturopathic convention. It's talking about vitamin B. As a matter of fact, probably the most single factor in the vitamin B complex is the B4 fraction, otherwise known as the anti-paralysis vitamin. If you give a patient synthetic thiamine, when he is deficient in B4, he will temporarily respond, but very soon has a relapse and be worse than ever. Boy, how many times have we seen this? Heart disease is the commonest reaction, I believe, to be vitamin B deficiency. There's a statement, 2 sentences. Heart disease is the commonest reaction to B4 deficiency. The innervation to the heart becomes partly paralyzed. The pulse becomes erratic. These cells that are beating within the tissue itself are not, they're not doing their job. They're not there because of a food deficiency. And of course, Cataplex B, his original formulation, what did he have in here? Yeast, cereal germ, that's your defatted wheat germ, beet juice, and liver. That's it. That's it. And over the years, standard process, different formulators started adding things in. Oh, they added in thiamine hydrochloride. Yeah. Yeah. And all of these other factors. And my colleague, Mark Anderson, and Tim Bayan from Ohio, and I worked with them, but Mark worked with them for 2 years to go back to the original formula. And we did pretty good. We got the defatted wheat germ back, which is your key source of vitamin B4. Then there's the yeast, there's the liver, and the beetroot. Now, rice bran has been added in because that's a great source of B vitamins. And of course, carrots with the vitamin A, and sweet potato. And I looked up before the lecture today. I'm like, why did they decide to put sweet potato in? So I looked it up. The number one factors in sweet potato is, the first thing, I'll give you just the top 2, is B vitamins and vitamin C. Sweet potatoes are an excellent source of betaine, a beta carotene, vitamin A, vitamin C, and potassium. There it is. That's why it's in there in small amounts. And of course, I will give you these notes, which I think I put in the last one, about the different foods that the B vitamins, especially the B4 factor, is highest in, what depletes it. And if you just look through this, heat, coffee, sunlight, nicotine, sugar, alcohol, just think of our society and why. When I first started out teaching and going around the country, Lynn Mayer and I in Utah, I was at a break, and just a wonderful gentleman, chiropractor for 40 years, devoted his life to helping other people. Because I had mentioned in my lecture a quote from Dr. Lee, and my colleague Mark mentions it a lot, that you should never feel your heart. You shouldn't even know that you have a heart. Of course, upon exercise, of course you feel it after that, but not being quiet and going to bed at night. You shouldn't feel your heart beating on your pillow at night. You shouldn't feel it while you're sitting quietly. You shouldn't even know you have a heart. So when I mentioned this gentleman came up in the afternoon break. He said, "Joe, I have felt my heart my whole life." He goes, "Why do you think that is?" And I said, "Well, let me run a graph and I can give you a better idea." And so I ran the graph, at 3:30. And here was his heart. S1, S2. Look at the difference in the work cycle and the rest cycle. See it? Too long. And then the heart takes off. See it? Same pattern here. A little bit better. This is the left side of the heart, right side. All his life. He said, well, it never bothered me, so I never did anything about it. But eventually, you can get into all kinds of problems. Fortunately for him, if you look at the S1s, he has no leakage in his heart, maybe a little bit here. But the heart gets weak. This is an indication of how strong the muscle is, the heart muscle itself. And you can see that especially on this side, it's weaker, it's stronger on this side. He was on B vitamins. So at that time, we didn't have the Cataplex B core. That is basically a B4 product. It has all the other B vitamins, but it mainly emphasizes the B4 factor, imbalance with the B1 factor. So I gave him 8 Cataplex B that I had in my bag. And I said, come back at the end after the end of the 6 o'clock, 5:30 at the end of the day. I ran another graph, and you can see that there is the innervation of his heart had changed in that 2-hour period, 2 hours, probably quicker than that. But that's when I checked him. There's your before, after. And of course, I asked him, I said, well, how do you feel? Which was my main interest. And he goes, I have never felt so peaceful. I can't feel my heart anymore. I said, good. So I gave him my bottle of Cataplex B, which we were teaching again on Sunday, but unfortunately, I didn't have it for that day. So all of these fibrillations, your key product are going to be what I just reviewed with you. Any fibrillation, but arrhythmias in that section of my book. Your key product is going to be Cataplex B core, cardiotrophin, and then think of the other areas, especially the endocrine system, and particularly within that, the thyroid. Now, for AFib or general fibrillation, you want, of course, there are your 2 key products, and I want to review with you in this section organically bound minerals. And this is from Vitamin News, and you should, I hope these copies come out good for you. The nervous control of the heart is affected by means of the balance power of the 2 divisions of the autonomic nervous system. This is why I say the heart rhythm sources from within itself, but it can be overtaken or imbalanced by the brain, by infection, by hormonal imbalances, and of course, by malnutrition, which is the means by which that balance returns. But the division of the autonomic nervous system, sympathetic, and he calls it vagus, but parasympathetic. Are you too fast? You're too slow. And these 2 are always what he calls opposing each other. There's always that seesaw balance where you want it right in the middle. The sympathetic tends to speed up and increase the circulation of the blood in response to physiological demands, fight or flight. The vagus inhibits according to similar demands. So the vagus is either if the vagus becomes too hyperactive, then you get tachycardia, hypertension, rapid respiration, dry mouth, and so on. And exercise Anger and emotion initiate stimuli to the sympathetic. Exercise, anger, and emotion. Deficiency of organic potassium found in green leafy vegetables can paralyze the vagus, allowing this stimuli the sympathetic division. So there's no regulator to have too great a deal, too prolonged an effect. The result is sympathetic atonia. These symptoms. And so you know how much I love organically bound minerals, because it's not just the source, it's the primary source of potassium, but it's also a good source of magnesium and iodine as well. All of the minerals for the body are only found in one place in nature, on this planet, and that place is the ocean. Sea lettuce. And I was told, I have to confirm it, that at one time, Lee, Mrs. Lee and Dr. Lee lived in California, as well as outside of the Milwaukee area, Wisconsin, and he had kelp farms. He had sea lettuce farms at one point as resources. Of course, they buy it now. And of course, they grow their own alfalfa, but not all the minerals that are needed for the body. The only place is the ocean. And again, same symptomatology. If the heart is going too fast, you have to put the brakes on. And does it affect other things? Well, let's see what he said. Spasticity, esophageal cramps. You know how many people that are on HCl blockers, acid blockers, they have trouble with their valves, their sphincters through their digestive system, the ileocecal valve, both valves on the upper and lower part of the stomach, these sphincter spasms, pyloric valve, which ties in with constipation, because they're too sympathetic dominant, and giving them the potassium, the magnesium, and the iodine to calm it all down, then these valves can return to normalcy. I've taken people with severe heartburn. Now, there's other things you can use. I've just given them organically bound minerals. In 3 days, it was gone pretty much. They had the food combined, check for hiatal hernia, of course, and stop eating wheat grown in this country. So this is the person that we looked at this before, who has this fluttering pattern. Here it is. The B core, yes, to regulate that nerve conduction within the heart, and then organically bound minerals to slow down. Now, in my book, I had created, which I'm not going to go into today, but I've given you all the materials to understand it. These 3 herbs blended in a liquid help with atrial fibrillation, that flutter, tachycardia, all arrhythmias. And motherwort is used thousands of years for people with hyperactivity, especially their hearts too fast. Dong Quai, which you wouldn't think, you would think this is more of a female herb, quiets the chi. And hawthorn leaves. Now, I'm not going to say too much about hawthorn, but I will say this. Hawthorn is thought to be an herb that is specific for the heart. It is not. Indirectly, it's a circulatory herb. So hawthorn is also called crataegus. So just crataegus, I'm sorry. Numerous Chinese formulations now incorporate the herb for strengthening heart function. lowering blood lipids and dilating blood vessels to promote blood circulation. An example of a modern blood visualizing formulation featuring hawthorn is the brain vitalizing pill, which has the following. Oh, okay. It's intended to dilate blood vessels, improve circulation. This is the purpose for hawthorn. So if you have a heart situation where you have a lot of arrhythmias and you're thinking, oh, this is gonna, it's not. It will help it indirectly, but not directly, which is fine. I use it in the formula, but I use it for the purpose. And it's good to understand the direct function and application of these different herbs, because it's more to improve, as I say, blood circulation, reduce blood lipids, which never is talked about. Atherosclerosis, it's for coronary heart disease, not the heart itself, but things related to the heart, post-stroke, and on and on. And of course, they put in any type of blood thinner. You want to be sure that, you know, they get their permission if you're going to use hawthorn and use this. I would suggest if you're going to use this, which is, you know, a teaspoon in the morning, teaspoon in the evening, to go half that dose for a week. I think I put that in the book, and then go to the full dose. Just do it for a few weeks and see if it helps calm everything down. But you have to work with the other factors first. And I went through each of the herb. I found readings like the one I just described for you. And so that you can go through and review all of these. So we've looked at slowing things down, especially in tachycardia, palpitation. But the ones I want to go through quickly here have to do with specifically E2, G, Orchex, and Simplex F. So this was a client that I worked with, and this was right between Christmas and New Year's a couple of years ago. And then I checked him again about 3 weeks later, about 20 days later. And he was in tachycardia, palpitation. Why is this bad? Because the body doesn't get enough oxygen. So if the heart is too slow, it doesn't get enough oxygen, and it's too fast, it doesn't get enough oxygen. Because this resting part, these ventricles can't refill quick enough. And then you can get into what they call angina, heart pains, whether it's too slow or too fast, but particularly too fast. Fast pulse or slow pulse. And you can see that in 3 weeks on these products, there's the body brake, right? The potassium, the braking mineral, and then the G and the E2, which I'll go into now. And of course, Cataplex E2 is part of the E complex that Lee discovered that is a relaxant. Cramps, spasms, for things like colitis, diarrhea, asthma, insomnia, palsy, biliary, gallbladder issues. See how broad that we don't think about E2, which is also in Cardio Plus. So you can read through what Lee used this for and why. Because it is the oxygen conserving vitamin for the human body. And look at out of his therapeutic food manual, oxygen metabolism. Look at the #1 product though, everyone. Cataplex E2 is second. So vitamin C helps with carrying the oxygen to the tissue. E2 holds the oxygen in the tissue, so there's less demand for it. And Orchex also helps with this relaxation factor, which I'll get into in a second. But Cataplex G, for this type of pattern where the very hyperactive heart is crucial. Because why? What does G have? G has the ability to relax. So the B complex, this side, which originally the B complex was divided, no more. It's just B vitamins are synthetically made. They're not clinically specific. But Standard Process, the only company in the world, still does that. Has B and G specifically together. Now you could say this is more, this B1, B4 factor is more for tonification, for the slow heart. This is more for the fast heart. Though we have found, returning to Cataplex B core, that the B core seems to work really well with people that are too fast and too slow. People that are hyper and hypo. Very interesting. But as my wonderful teacher, John Courtney, taught me, Joe, if the B vitamin Cataplex B isn't working, switch them over to Cataplex G. So this tends to balance blood pressure if it's high. This tends to balance blood pressure if it's too low. But we have had reports now on the Cataplex B core that they put them on that and their blood pressure, their high blood pressure normalized. And of course, you know how much I love this product because, and the combination of Orchex and Mintran is a product called Minchex, which I think just came off back order. So a lot of you have been using this. And you will see that not only does it act as a tranquilizer, but it also helps move fluids. It helps to balance fluids throughout the body, synovial fluid, the dynamics in between the nerve synapses, where you get too many neurotransmitters in these nerve synapses. And that's one of the main reasons for tachycardia, that this is really a brain body issue and a gut body issue, a gut nervous system issue, because most of the neurotransmitters are produced in the gut. And so any hyperactive person, either Minchex or Orchex and Mintran separately, is the way to go. And this is the explanation of the of how this. And remember, they talked about when I first read to you in the video about depolarization. You probably don't remember, but if you go back and listen to the video again, that's a crucial part of how the heart contracts and relaxes, is through this depolarization process. And that's why this product in particular, with someone that has an overactive heart, too much, can gain great results. And that's why I put this in here, because what Lee said here about this, because what I didn't put in, which is so significant about the heart, is whether it's getting enough oxygen or not. We can't live on this planet without water, oxygen, and the sun. Can't do it. Now, people know about water and oxygen, water and sun, but they don't think much about oxygen to the tissues. This is why in all of these whether the heart is too fast or too slow, if it's not getting the right amount of oxygen, if it's starved in particular, then the heart will begin to die, whichever symptoms carries with that. And so if you've got clients, you're working with them, elderly people, and you say, Joe, I'm doing all this, they're still not getting better. Add in OR checks. Now you could say, well, what about mid checks? If they are hyperactive, yes, because you want the relaxing effects of the Mintran. But if not, give them the straight OR check. You only need to give them, I say in my book, I think it's 3 to 6 a day, a little bit higher dose. You can do 2-3 times a day. And so the last has to do with this hyperactivity, which we don't think much about, is the vitamin F factor. Now we think of the vitamin F factor as to helping with getting calcium, of diffusing calcium, of moving calcium into the tissue, it not hanging around in the blood, creating problems with cataracts in the eyes and kidney stones and plaquing on the arteries, all of that. Calcium you need, calcium you want, but you don't want it in the blood. You want it in the tissues. And vitamin F and vitamin F2 is the calcium delivery mechanism. And particularly, Dr. Lee highly valued a product that probably some of you probably have never used or used very little, Super EFF, which is, now we primarily use the Cataplex F tablets. So 1/3 of the Cataplex F tablets is Super EFF. So you can remember that. But look at the first thing that he says. This is my little bullet for you here. Look at the first symptom that he uses Super EFF for, tachycardia. Interesting, huh? There's so much, as I say, in these books. Let's see what he said. So the end result of linoleic and linolenic acid is arachidonics. That's what it finally breaks down into. What does that do? It acts as an insulating layer or wrapper for the determinant factors that guide the reactions of healing and construction, an important factor in anemias, for example. And the above effect has been found clinically useful in the promotion of healing and inflammatory conditions. Inflammation, everyone. And so many have, not so many, but a few have argued me about, oh, well, arachidonic acid is pro-inflammatory. It's not true, not so. And I'll show you this in a second, particularly those involving the lymphatic system. People with lymphatic cancer, people with lymphatic issues, their immune systems don't function well. This is a product. They're not healing. This is a product for people that are not healing, but it is especially useful because it protects the nerve sheath, the lipid wrapper at the nerve ending. And this is its real claim to fame. Apparently synergistic with inositol. And I've had people, well, let me read the rest of this, which has potentiating effect on the energy, the Krebs cycle, adenosine triphosphate of the muscle tissue, cellular respiration, muscle tissue as evidenced by beneficial effects in tachycardia. And I couldn't find it, but Lee said Super EFF helps with tachycardia in 60% of the cases. Now, I've had people try it with their hearts are too fast. And They have palpitations. They say, oh, Joe, that didn't work. But look what Lee said. This is why studying these little paragraphs and sentences that I give you, you're going to have to study them. I'll be 50 years next year studying these and going over and over and over, because you always pick up something new. Look at what he said. Apparently synergistic with inositol, which is another B vitamin, the muscle nerve vitamin. Oh, the Super EFF didn't work for this patient with tachycardia. You said it would 60%. I guess they were in the 40%. Did you use with inositol then? Don't give up on these products. These products are 90%, my opinion. And I'm not going to read this through, but Chris Masterjohn, who works for, well, he has a practice in New York City. This is what he wrote about this, this arachidonic acid being pro-inflammatory. Arachidonic acid is not pro-inflammatory or anti-inflammatory, but is rather a raw material that our body uses to regulate the process of inflammation. I could not find anywhere else where it's better put, or myself. And he goes into the rest of this. So the last part here in the last few minutes is to quickly go into bradycardia. What does that look like when someone is too slow? And here's the example. Remember I said that work to rest ratio? Well, this is the antithesis of being too fast, where you're not getting enough oxygen. If you're too slow, as I say, you're on the other end of this, you're still not getting enough oxygen. These people have a lot of problems with their thinking, their cognition, their brain, because they're too slow. This is the other side of needing that. They have too much brake. They need energy to the cells of their heart. They need energy, that they need an accelerator for their autonomic nervous system, not a brake. And so the product that I wanted to outline here with bradycardia, because we've looked at a lot of these others here today, is phosphate liquid. And here it is. Now, remember what I said earlier about the autonomic nervous system. The vagus nerve can either be suppressed or it could be overstimulated. So overstimulated, use the potassium. If it's understimulated, flat, you're going to want to use some form of phosphorus. Phosphate liquid, soybean lecithin, or Circuplex are the main standard process products. And you can go through, I think you'll be surprised when you go through the symptoms of not having the vagus nerve functioning normally. I'll give you one. I could take any one and talk for 10 minutes on each one. Hypertension, pipe stem arteries, advanced case. Oh, you need phosphorus for that? Yes. Yeah. Number one, they've become like a pipe stem, stiff, because they've got too much calcium in there. Will it take too much calcium off? No. Never had any trouble with that over using it for 90 years or a little less than that. Gastric hyperacidity. Well, wait a minute, Joe. Are you going to use phosphoric acid for hyperacidity? Yes. Yes, because if the nerve impulse going into that tissue is suppressed, the body overreacts and then produces too much. You have to balance that out, which autonomic function, sympathetic and parasympathetic function is challenging to understand. But if you stick with Dr. Lee and how he described it, you'll be able to use it much more effectively. So, hypothyroid. Joe, I've used everything you said. Have you used phosphorus for these, for the accelerator of the control glands? No, I didn't try that. Okay. Try that. And he talks about it here as far as the symptoms of being too slow. So what did we give this person? We gave this person, oh, here it is. Cataplex B, cardiotrophin, and soybean lecithin, 3 and 3. Here is one of the sources of other things for this person, but mainly that source of phosphorus, excuse me. This person needs acceleration. This almost looks like a heart block right here. This may have been part of the other, beat here. I'm not sure. But look how much they balanced out in a short period of time. Now they're balanced. And that makes all the difference, everyone. Balancing them out, balancing the heart through working with, as I say, hormone, infection, autonomic piece, using nutrition makes all the difference. And so I hope you've enjoyed this. I'll look forward to being with you again on the 18th, looking at the pancreas in my series on the endocrine system. So with that, Lynn, should I shut off the, I guess I could leave it on because you can always take it off. So if any of you have any questions, I talked about a lot today.
I have a question, Joseph.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, the patient I'm just going to correct today with the NUCA, but so I'll get the graph to you. He was doing some things that you mentioned. So he's very tall and lengthy man. He has his father has a history of stroke. Yeah, he passed away from it. He has a hernia when he was an infant, gout, 2017 car accident. Anyway, he has burping. Every time you put pressure on any part of his body, he actually puts his back between his shoulder blades against a door, and it helps him burp and get out of a lot of pain. And he has insomnia. So without looking at the graph related to this, you're thinking.
You say he's very slender, and is he kind of slow?
No, he's a contractor construction, not really slow. Well, maybe, but he's not really slender. He's just very lengthy.
So
very
you didn't,
tall.
yeah. So
I don't have a heart graph yet.
So the first thing with any time of biliary stasis, burping, that is a gallbladder issue. Okay. So you could take a person like this and put them on some beta food, and then check, see if he's okay with giving you the color of his stools. If they're too light, he may need
both, diarrhea and constipation for 10 years.
Well, that is an ileocecal valve problem. So he's fluctuating back and forth. So to lubricate that valve, you want to give them chlorophyll pearls. So, which will help, that's the fat soluble A, E, F, and K. So that will help with a lot of other things in his body. But, and it will be soothing. But the main two products with belching and burping is a backup. The bile is too thick. So you want to think about giving him the bile thinning product, which is beta food. You could use AF beta food too, but beta food is stronger. It's a third stronger. I should say that AF beta food is a third less strong than beta food. And okay. you want to give him, check his ileocecal valve, give him and if so, if he has issues there, listen, if you palpate that, Dr. Keppel, you can, if you don't know how to do that, you can learn from his PowerPoints and webinars, which you can get through Saline River Press, how to fix that ileocecal valve. If you go in and palpate that, that will be very tender. So
Yeah,
that's,
it was at tender at the stomach. Yes.
but listen, this guy, I'm just what we're talking about. He is too slow. If you're backing up like that in the intestine with the ileocecal valve, with the biliary, you want to give him a little phosphorus too. So that's what I would do to start. Check him, ileocecal valve. He can do knee to chest exercises too to keep that opened up. That valve is like a lens of a camera. It's not like isn't like a hinge type valve. It opens and closes like a fan. So you need to lubricate that. That's why Goodhart did so much work with chlorophyll, those fat soluble vitamins, lubricating that particular area of the body as those the fat soluble chlorophyll opens up, gets down into that area, and just it lubricates it, helps it to move more easily. So that's where I would start. Now, why did he get into this? Well, you've got to get his history, find out what he's eating. You know, he's a big guy. If he's tall and lanky, and check his heart, find out, is he too slow? Is he too fast? So,
Okay,
for sure.
I will.
But,
Thank you. And I wanted to tell you. Oh, go ahead.
go ahead. No, that's it.
I wanted to tell you on a different case, the one that I helped with the baby who was losing oxygen to placenta and the cord. We applied the cardiotrophin, Cataplex B core, and Ferrofood, and she just the baby's fine, she's doing great. But now this patient, the mom, has had exercise-induced asthma for 9 years, could never do anything. And now all of a sudden, since the baby's been out, and then now she has all these supplements, she says, "What have you done? These supplements are great." And so I want to thank you, Joseph, because you're right. It's just literally she can do cardio every single morning. And she says, all my friends are noticing what's going on. I'm a totally different person.
Right.
So thank you.
Because that's right. Thank you. And wonderful you're helping her. Because now what I said in the very beginning of this hour and a half, you're establishing that foundation with cardiotrophin and B. I'm sure the Ferrofood is helping her because that can create all kinds of, remember, oxygen, a good part of oxygen carrying capacity has to do with iron. So, and where is the iron after you give birth? In the baby, not in the mother, not as much. So you've done exactly the right thing, but you've created that foundation with those two products. Yes, the other ones that we talked about today, SupreFF, E2, G, sure, all of those, but your core is cardiotrophin and B. So great job.
Joseph,
Yes.
with Tanya's first patient, the guy with the ileocecal valve, wouldn't you also use the Spanish black radish to help?
Well, yes, but the cautionary note here, and the reason I didn't mention it. So
Okay.
Goodhart established this core direction, this compass of using chlorophyll for the ileocecal valve. Spanish black radish came along after Lee died. It's a great product for that. That's more of a stool softener. That's why it helps to free up the fecal matter in the bowel and therefore frees up that valve from getting stuck open or closed. But the cautionary note here, it doesn't make it a bad product. It's a great product, a very good source of chlorophyll and other nutrients. But some people have a hard time with sulfur vegetables. This is a major sulfur vegetable, and it gives them gas. So the last thing I want to do with this guy that she described, it's great. It's a great call. The last thing I want to do is create more air in his system backing up, belching, back and forth with constipation. And that'd be the last thing. You put him on that, and God forbid that it had that effect. He's going to call you and say, "Yeah, I'm not taking this product." He'll tell you right
Should he
away.
chew them or swallow?
Because some people on the cleanse use the SP Complete. And what does that have? Sulfur vegetables, right? And so some people, they get on the cleanse and they call you and they say, Joe, I'm bloated all the time. So you got to put them on the other, what's the other powder that I take every day?
Whey Pro,
Yeah,
Whey Pro
Pro.
Complete.
Yeah. So
Should he chew them or swallow them, Joseph? I forgot what you said with chlorophyll when it's dealing with the ileocecal.
my experience with chlorophyll is you always chew it. I take, if I get up in the morning and I'm a little stiff and sore, I go over and I'll take 3 or 4 chlorophyll. I break them right open in the mouth. In 5 minutes, that pain and stiffness and soreness is gone. If you feel like there's a lot of guanidine, which is a toxic that can build up in your system, and you have a lot of chronic pain, chlorophyll is your key because it neutralizes guanidine. This is more in people that have a lot of inflammation and are older. Not to say that it won't help, but it isn't 100% with chronic pain and inflammation. It's specific to those who are the body is making a lot of this guanidine, which, as I say, is a toxic substance in the body. So yes, one of the products you always want to open up in your mouth for whatever reason is chlorophyll. Yeah. It'll turn your mouth green and your teeth green, for 10 minutes. Big deal, So.
And if you
Joseph?
pop it in the back of your back molars and then drink some water, you shouldn't get all the green
Yeah,
on
exactly.
your teeth and
Right.
tongue.
That's a
Yes.
good way of doing it. The main thing is your body, you want the parotid glands to tag it. And here is where, again, Lee felt that the parotid glands was an endocrine gland. He felt, if you read some of his old work, that it did secrete hormone. Well, what is that? That's messaging. Whenever you talk about enzymes or hormone, these are the messaging substances, mechanisms, and substances of the body. This is how the body communicates. That's why, parotid, again, beloved George Goodhart made it famous because he would get people up there in front that they really weren't responding to any supplement or care to the degree that they wanted to accomplish. And he'd have them chew up parotid. So I've seen it dozens of times with Dr. Goodhart. He made parotid famous, and that's the reason. And Dr. Keppel, of course, is a great parotid fan and uses it very, very effectively in his practice. So,
Joseph,
go ahead.
Hi, this is Natalie Hart. I just had a question about when you're referring to balancing the nervous system, excuse me, and so you're using either, your phosphid to speed up, or you're using the minerals to slow down. How long do you give those supplements to work before deciding that they may need something to balance with their brains, either like the neuroplex or where it's more of a brain issue than a nutrient?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's not too complex either. Let the heart tell you. So if you've got them, where they're, they're looking like, just get back to these, so we can have a visual. If they're looking like this, and you apply this. This was 3 weeks, right? So to answer your question, you give them the supplement, you check their heart. Now I'll get to maintenance after, but to finish your question, if you get them to this point and they still have other brain symptoms, headaches, brain fatigue, loss of memory, they don't sleep well, That could all be a closed head injury. That's where you would get into the neuroplex or the neurotrophin. So if that's what you were asking. Now, if you were asking about balancing the brain as far as the pituitary is concerned, if you give them, say you gave this gentleman organically bound minerals, G and E2, and in 3 weeks when he comes back to me, it's not any better, or it's not much better. There's always a difference. Then I know what I think the other piece of what you're asking, is there a brain factor? And the answer is yes. Now the brain is continuing to override even the goodness of the mineral, of the vitamin. And that's when you need to get into pituitrophin, because that is going to be your key. Remember, pituitrophin is going to tell the thyroid to go or not go. And thyroid is going to affect the heart. So you see that cascade of intelligence of how the body naturally, beautifully works and is designed. So now, just to finish, what happens? You get them all balanced out. How do you want to, what do you want to do then? Well, there's several things you can do. If they are showing other things, you could give them, for the phosphorus, you give them the soybean lecithin, right? And in the evening, you give them the calming things so they can sleep, so that that vagus nerve gets balanced out so they can rest and digest. So in the morning, you give phosphorus, right? Breakfast and lunch, dinner and before bed, Mintran, Minchex, organically bound minerals based on their symptoms. So that's what I recommend. Now, some people with Minchex initially might keep them up because they're still flushing out those aberrant chemicals in their nerve synapses. So those neurotransmitters still are not cleaned out and balanced. So just give them Minchex at night. So anyway, I hope that answers all your questions and beyond, because when someone is like this, and I know this guy hasn't stuck with what I did. I mean, not I did, what the supplements did through my guidance. He's probably back to this because he would not change his lifestyle and eating, which is, it's no condemnation. He's a wonderful person. Love this guy. But people can drift back because if people are deficient, they come in so deficient for decades. They've been deficient. You correct them in 6 weeks or 2 weeks. Well, they're going to slip right back into that because they were deficient because they're not eating right. So, or they've got this breakdown, or they've been so demineralized. So most people, again, after 60 years old, you've got to do maintenance every day, or, 3 days a week of some things and 3 days a week of other things. We can't give everybody everything all at once unless you're Joseph Antel.
So,
Anyway.
So Joseph, in this case, you would keep them on the minerals and the G, but then you would just add pituitrophin to it?
Yes, right. So you would add, because what was it? Was it the potassium? Was it the vitamin? Was it the oxygen factor? Or was it the pituitary? It could be all 4 things, all 4 factors. So yes, so when you're building that, now if you have them on 6 other things, then leave some of those off until you clarify the heart function and balance first, always. The heart is the window, is the guide. I talk to Lynn several times during the week. She tells me about clients and she'll say, well, their heart is better and now they're better. And others too, not just Lynn, but I work closely with Lynn. So she tells me that is such a true principle. you're not just fixing the heart. Through the heart, you're accessing all of the other systems, because the electricity in the whole body originates in the heart and then moves out from there. It moves back to the brain, like I showed you. It has the oxytocin it secretes as much as the brain does, probably more. It's through that electrical balance is everything. It really is everything. This is your guide. You can watch the care of a person. How are they doing? Are they moving along? And if they're not, it doesn't make you a bad practitioner. Either you haven't found the right combination, or they're not fully cooperating with you, or they just need more time. So, and then, but you may not need to continue to use the pituitrophin forever, but the other vitamins and minerals, probably you will to some degree. So somebody want to say something? Go ahead.
I see this very often. My husband and my son both had catheter ablations years ago, and that's where I discovered eventually to put G, E2, and organically bound minerals together. I see this very often in my patients because, I work a great deal with Lyme disease. So that, again, is a brain body infection and so forth. So if you run this graph at the beginning of your session with your patient, and then have them chew. I keep these on my desk, these 3 bottles, and I just have them chew right at the beginning after I do the graph, to show them. Right. And it just works beautifully. And they're like, what the heck did you give me? And they're like, give me a bottle of it, all of it, because they're good to have on hand, even if they don't stay on this protocol every single day, is that when they do have an episode of tachycardia, they know exactly what to do. And it works like a charm.
Yeah. Absolutely. And this case where I told you about this doctor, and Lynn probably remembers this gentleman. When he came back at 6 o'clock, me to check him again, he's like, Joe, I've never felt like this I don't feel my heart anymore. It's truly amazing. You're like, he goes, he said, I'm on B vitamins. How could this possibly work? Well, it worked because you weren't using the right range of the B vitamins, the B4 factor. So it's very true. I'm glad you're doing that. And others, Astrid and others have done this. They check people right in the office before and after. They have them sit there. They're in your nice, beautiful atmosphere, your healing field. That helps. And you're seeing how quickly they respond. We know that nutrients, if people really need them, they respond in minutes, hours, not days and weeks and months and years, but within minutes. That's how starved the body is. And once you begin to fill in those parts of the body that are missing it just comes into its place of peace. Harmony, balance, healing. Pretty amazing. Because these are living substances. They're living frequencies. They're not dead chemicals. Go ahead, sir.
There was one question in the chat box which pertained to the beating of the heart. And he hears his heart when he's laying on his pillow, and wonder if that's also...
Yes. So I didn't go into that because I had so much to cover today in that potassium deficiency syndrome, but here it is. When the muscle receives glucose, I don't care if it's your calf muscle, your heart muscle, when it receives glucose, what is glucose? It is fire. It's energy, right? It is firing off that muscle. And if you don't have a regulator for it, remember, potassium is the regulator, then it will just keep firing off. That's why we give them the organically bound minerals. That's why you hear your heart at night. Some people can have a glass of wine and go to bed and they can feel their heart pounding for a few hours. They wake up in the middle of the night and they're fine. Some people don't. Some people have that. So if you have that, having said all of that, remember to take I would take 6 organically bound minerals. Keep the organically bound minerals right in the bathroom. If you go in my bathroom right now, we could FaceTime, you will see in my bathroom organically bound minerals, magnesium lactate, and what's the other one in there? Cataplex E2. And I have high pep in there. If I wake up with an acid stomach, take a few high pep, gone. So, but I keep organically bound minerals because I do drink wine, not every night, but 3 or 4 nights a week. And sometimes I go to bed and I get that. You go in, you take 4 to 6, make sure you chew them. You don't have to chew them up, but get the taste in your mouth, not much water, go back to bed, wait. Usually you just fall right off to sleep. But if you're still awake in 15 minutes or you wake back up and it's still there, very rare, take another 6. I've never gone beyond 12, ever. That's when I drank vodka. But anything will do it. Any glucose, alcohol, pie and ice cream before bed, chocolate especially, cookies before bed, cereal before bed. Children will get it. That's why children go to bed and they're laughing and goofing around. And I know I raise children and have grandchildren. You got to give them something calm before bed. What do they always say? Drink a glass of milk before bed. Oh, calcium, magnesium, other minerals. Anyway, so I hope does that answer the question, Lynn? But that firing, the muscle uses that glucose. Let me see if I can find that here. That's under cardiotrophin. Whoa.
Well, and it was in particular, if you hear that sound of your heart when you're laying, have your ear against the pillow.
Right. So that is the heart pounding when you do that. Yes. Yep. That heart sound is the sugar, the glucose, which he talks about right here. See this? Carbohydrate metabolism, failure of the muscle cell to metabolize glucose. And what helps that metabolizing and regulating of that glucose is potassium. Of course, cardiotrophin would help too, but to alleviate that immediately. And the reason you feel it into your ear is because as the heart is pounding, it's moving that blood up to the top of your head in a very forceful way, and it shouldn't be. You should not know that you have a heart. That's how quiet it should be within your body. Right? When you get excited, you get upset, or, you almost have a car accident. Your heart is pounding, right? You not only feel it in your heart, you feel it in your head. Well, that's adrenal reaction too, of course. That's adrenaline. But that is in a smaller way, the lack of potassium. Could be magnesium too, but that's why organically bound minerals is perfect, because it has the magnesium and the potassium and the iodine, which helps calm the thyroid down, if that's a factor. So your key product is organically bound minerals.
Joseph, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, hi. My name is Sue Willingham, and I have a couple of questions that I wonder if I should email them to you or ask you now.
Well, you could ask me one and then call me.
Call you. Okay.
Where do you practice?
In Kamiah, Idaho.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. I have a client who you read their heart sound recording, and you saw on there that he was holding back fluid. This doesn't, and he's taking the AC glutamine and Arginex, but he also takes a water pill in the morning.
Oh, AC carbamide.
Yeah.
And what else?
And Arginex.
Good. Okay.
In the afternoon, you said for him to do that in the afternoon and morning and stay on the hydrochlorothiazide because he fills up with water.
Right.
Real easily. Is there any way that we can tell by the heart sound recorder if he is getting that under control? He wants
right here, right here. You see this? So when you run the graph, if his heart valve is leaking, that is the beginning signs of congestive heart failure.
Okay.
Now, it could be that the muscle itself is not doing well. So again, cardiotrophin, cataplex B. But this gives you, you have your baseline graph. You have the one that you started with him. If these aren't gone, see if they're better.
Okay.
Now, remember, if his heart, if these, you don't see these vibrant 3 peaks like here, you can look here after the valve closes. But if you don't see these in their natural vibrancy, then cardiotrophin, but this may be a thyroid issue. Does he have, does he have thinning hair? Go review my thyroid lecture. Does he have all of that symptomatology?
Well, he's 79 years old and he's.
Oh, well, that's, you would think his thyroid would be slower. Yes. At 80.
And he's pretty strong. He has kind of a large belly, and I've been working with him for quite a while with his AFib and everything. But
is he better, I guess, is my question.
He's staying about the same, I think.
Okay.
But his AFib went with the B core and cardiotrophin. The AFib has calmed down. We're going to go do another heart sound recorder. We go to Lonnie Schwartzman in
Oh, yes. I know Dr. Schwartzman. Yes.
Yeah.
Wonderful guy.
Yeah, he is. And so he doesn't get to come to your lectures because his office, he works during these times.
Yes. But he can get my recordings now.
Good. I'll tell him that. He will.
But this older gentleman, what you want to look at is these rest periods.
Okay.
If this is not improving, other things are beginning to improve, or he's stabilized, at 80 years old, you've got him, at least he's no worse. But you want to take another step. Think of the thyroid. Think of thytrophin, maybe a little bit of iodine, but organically bound minerals.
Yes, I put him on that, and his heart rate goes down sometimes, like to 60 and 56, and sometimes
that's okay, as long as it doesn't go below 50. That's fine.
So he can do the organically bound minerals. Good.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, but you just said it to us. His heart rate goes down.
Yeah.
So usually someone with AFib, not only does the heart not rest, but it does tend to get faster. So again, this beautiful control, mechanism through the potassium, in particular, and magnesium.
All right. Thank you, Joseph.
You're welcome.
Joseph, can you hear me?
I can hear you fine.
My name is Scott. I'm from a little south of Atlanta in Georgia. I was wondering if you could give a little background. We always hear that organically bound minerals is the go-to primary source of potassium,
right?
But also, like you said, the magnesium and iodine. But why is it when we go to the label, it only shows the iodine?
Because these are food concentrates. So the FDA requires that if it reaches the amounts that, the daily value, they have to put it on the label. But fortunately, because measuring amounts is reductionism. It is not food related. It's not concentrated food is not synthetic vitamins. And
Correct.
do you know how many clients that I have that when they've come to me over the years, they say, I'll say, oh, I see you've got a little bit of potassium deficiency, or they'll say, oh no, I'm on potassium. And this is what their heart, this guy, I remember this case. This guy was on potassium from Walgreens. He goes, oh no, I'm on potassium. You see the difference? Because the body understands frequency. It understands, is this real? Can I use this? Do I recognize it? Can I use it? Is it something, or a lot of times these minerals, like the B vitamins, as an example, minerals must have other minerals along with it to complement it. That's why food is the answer. But I have been very grateful over the years that they don't put all these, how much potassium, how much synthetic B vitamin. I'm glad. I don't, what I want to do is understand Royal Lee and stick to his,
Me too, completely.
May I interrupt just for a moment, Joseph?
Yes.
This is Carol Ferguson. When I was being taught by Dr. Versendahl, one of the comments he made a long, long time ago was that when a mineral is bound to another mineral, it is a poison. Standard process always binds their mineral to a protein. And that has stuck in my head for 100 years. I mean, it's just one of those things you just hear and it just clicks. I don't know if that's as accurate as what you're teaching.
Well, it's partially accurate because some minerals, for instance, I'll give you, because it's just what we're talking about. Potassium cannot get into the cell unless it rides piggyback on a magnesium molecule. It won't go in.
Yes,
that's why people that have a lot of water retention, but in the case of calcium, so this is what Dr. Versendahl said was accurate, but it isn't the whole story. Let me put it that way.
No, that's right.
Calcium, if it binds to other minerals or proteins, it's a problem. That's when people get into trouble with calcium. Calcium, that's why it needs to be a free calcium, detached to anything for it to ride in. Iodine has to ride into the cell on a protein. That's why you can take Lugol's solution. It's great, but you've got to use a lot of it, and it's not as effective as prolamine iodine, protein-bound iodine. So you just have to break it down. It is complex, and I'll try to teach you how much I know of this as we go along. But it all depends on the mineral and on the protein. So just so you know.
So Joseph, with the labeling that they give us on Cyruta Plus versus Cataplex C, if we kind of borrow from that reductionism, the fact that they have to label the amount of vitamin C as ascorbic acid in there, and we know that that's only part of the complex, could we make the argument that if it's got a higher amount of ascorbic acid, then it's also going to have a higher amount of rutin?
No, it would have a less amount of rutin. It would only have rutin in it if it had a food source of rutin. Ascorbic acid has no rutin. It has nothing.
Correct, but they're labeling that part of the vitamin C complex that the FDA recognizes as vitamin C.
Right, because
which they have to do by law. So if we know that, so if we know that the ascorbic acid makes up 5% of the whole vitamin C complex, if why ever use Cyruta Plus if it only has 3 milligrams of? Because
ascorbic acid is not vitamin C.
Correct, but it's 5%. So if 5%, if 3 milligrams is 5% of the whole in there, wouldn't 17 milligrams be 5% of a bigger whole?
Well, in the standard process, let me talk about that first. the amount of ascorbic acid is naturally occurring. They don't synthetically add that in.
Correct.
That's what comes out.
So
So
that means that there's more of the whole complex in that product, correct?
yes.
Well,
That's
and
right.
if
So
rutin is one of the bioflavonoids found in that complex, if there's more of the complex, wouldn't it mean there's more of the rutin?
Yes, there would be more rutin. The less ascorbic acid, the more the whole complex.
So if we're looking for blood vessel integrity, why ever use Cyruta Plus, which has so much less of the whole complex vitamin C in it than Cataplex C? Why, why should I use Cyruta Plus rather than Cataplex C?
Because there's more rutin in green buckwheat leaf than in all the other food sources in the Cataplex C complex. You see what I'm saying? So the sources of vitamin C.
But how do you know to say that if they can't even tell us how much is in the damn bottle? That's so frustrating.
Because they don't analyze. How can you analyze all that?
Well, how can you know that it has the highest concentration if it's never analyzed?
Doctor, maybe this would be an appropriate conversation for you and Joseph at another time, because Joseph has probably to answer other questions. And this is actually being recorded. So there's going to be a lot of doctors listening to this. So with the inappropriate language, maybe just give Joseph a time outside.
Yeah, I don't want to argue with you, but
I'm not trying to argue. It's just a source of frustration.
Okay, but I don't want anyone showing disrespect to Joseph, because Joseph is amazing.
Disrespect.
No,
it's my frustration. I apologize.
It's okay. It's all right. It's all right.
But okay, but let's maybe stop this conversation, Joseph, please, and just go to someone else's question.
Yeah,
because
well,
you are.
Let me finish with one thing, because when they did the study, on blocking that stroke, they found that rutin, that factor of rutin, was the main factor, but they never gave the amount. So it's the amounts that are in here are not always measurable. So, but to take a green buckwheat leaf and eat it would give you some rutin. But then when you concentrate and take out all the fiber and the water, then you concentrate it at least 10 times of what it was. It's actually more than that. But to give measurements of that, that's reductionism. That's not food concentrate science. Our minds don't have to know. Why do we have to know numbers? We know all the numbers of everything in this world. What good has it done us? What we need to know is what works. So anyway, that's be the last of that. But certainly you can call me. I love frustration. I'm frustrated too. So.
And that was no disrespect meant at you.
No, I know. Yeah,
that was my frustration.
No, that's okay. That's all right.
Thank you.
That's all right. Yes, you're very welcome. Someone else?
Joseph? Yeah. I've got your book, but I don't have it with me right now. I've got someone that's got gout, and Arginex is the #1 product for that, right?
That's right. Yeah.
About what amount would you suggest for a good sized male?
Well, gout usually in males, remember, gout, the uric acid is going to be neutralized by and gotten out of the body, so it doesn't. The problem with gout is that uric acid recycles. It goes through the kidneys and then back into the bloodstream and then through the kidneys. That's why the best thing with gout sufferers is stop eating.
Okay.
Don't eat and drink, and you will clear that gout in 72 hours. My father and brother suffered with gout. My brother now knows I don't drink alcohol, and if I get it, shut it down. That doesn't mean you don't eat anything, but you've got to get the liver to help to balance that out as quickly as possible because it's so painful. But what Arginex does, and the dosing for a big guy, if he's got active gout, I would give him 3 or 4 3 times a day, 9 to 12 a day.
Okay.
And then you also want to neutralize the gout. And it was just what we were talking about the vitamin C factor. The green buckwheat leaf in concentrate neutralizes uric acid. Now, how much and why, I don't know, but I just know that it works. And that's not much of a scientific answer, but you want to neutralize it. And also in the comfrey plant, there are also neutralizing enzymes in there. So ochrapepsin and Cyruta plus will neutralize. Arginex will clean it out. So Arginex is going to be 3 to 4 3 times a day. Cyruta plus the same, and ochrapepsin 3 times a day for about 2 weeks.
Okay.
No, remember, gout is the disease of royalty.
Yeah.
Of privilege, of lot of high, rich foods, meats, alcohol, all of that. There was just, I don't know if you're all watching this CNN program with Stanley Tucci. He's doing a tour of Italy, and he was in Bologna. The video was of, the show was on Bologna. And I went to Bologna with my daughter for 2 weeks. She took 2 semesters of school there. And the history of using the whole animal is the wealthy people got all the best cuts of meat and the richer parts. They're the ones that got gout. The ones that ate the organ meat, well, they were healthier. They didn't get gout as much. Now, you could argue the fact that the organ meats can create more uric acid, but that didn't happen with these people. It didn't, because of the amount of vitamins and minerals are stored in the organs, not in the muscle. What is in the muscle? A little protein. There's no lot of it's all in the brain, in the what organs were they all? So they were feeding what they thought the scraps to the poor people, but they were the healthier ones. So it's a fascinating show, and it was really great about honoring the whole animal, of eating the intestine, of eating the tongue, the heart, the brain. What else? Yeah. So, the sweetbreads, the thymus and the pancreas. Anyway.
Very interesting. Okay, thank you so much.
So, but gout is, as it's said in ancient scriptures and ancient texts of not just Christianity, but all, if you want to clarify things in your body, your mind, or your heart, prayer and fasting, shut it down.
Okay.
Drink more water. Now, you don't want to shut it down completely because you don't want to detox the person. You don't want to start dumping more in, but you do want to give the liver a chance to metabolize all this uric acid. And the kidneys is the best way to get it out, so you're not overwhelming the bloodstream with it.
Okay.
All right.
Yes, thank you.
Now, he may not do it. He'll say, no, I still want my 6-pack of beer every night. So
We'll see.
You'll have to fight that battle with him.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. Any more questions? All right, well, good. Well,
Joe?
Someone else? Yes.
Yeah, for just a question about what you recommend for alcoholism, and second question is, like, if you have, like, uncontrolled urination, probably from the alcohol, I don't know if there's, that's inducing that problem, or if you have a separate protocol for that.
Well, Bob, so alcohol is initially a stimulant, and then as the effect of the alcohol, you know, the downstream effect is it's a suppressant. And what it does is it raises blood sugar, and then the blood sugar crashes. So, you know, what do you do if you drink? Well, initially you're singing and dancing, and then you fall asleep, right? Well,
Right.
that's it. So a lot of times when a person has this issue, they have lost the electrical, so they have lost the electrical current that is regulating the bladder. They've lost that because alcohol depletes B vitamin. So I've helped more men and women with getting up at night and bladder issues with the Cataplex B core now, or the Cataplex B, over the years than any other. That is the vitamin, which was your first question. What helps alcoholics is B vitamin, because they, first of all, alcohol dissipates it. And remember, B vitamins are water soluble primarily, so they don't stay in your system long. And when you drink a lot of alcohol, you urinate all the B vitamins out, which regulates nerve flow and nerve conduction. So let me just mute everybody out here. So you can come back in, Bob, for a second. So the other product that has B vitamin, Dr. Lee, in the Royal Lee Library, a doctor was up there and sent this to me, that he had read that Dr. Lee had a dear friend with alcohol depression. So, which a lot of alcohols get very depressed. That's why they drink again. So he made up a batch of a supplement, a formulation for him, which is now this day called niacinamide B6.
Wow.
So we say that niacin, or niacinamide, is the food grade of it, was the first B vitamin ever found for schizophrenia. But it also, these ranges of B vitamins, for instance, B6 is the woman's vitamin. So these different B vitamins have their own characteristic, but niacinamide, vitamin B3, helps with anxiety and depression. And that's where most alcoholics, that's what they really are suffering from. So your B vitamins, Cataplex B core, and I would add niacinamide B6 to it. Also, with any type of depression or anxiety, think of the thyroid. There's something wrong with the life flow, the metabolic experience of that within that individual. So that's your thyroid, which would be thytrophin and iodine. And then, of course, who's metabolizing this alcohol? The liver. And that would be Antranex. A lot of people, do you ever have these clients where they say, oh, I drink a glass of wine, Joe, and then I get flushed in the face? Yeah, they're having a histamine reaction. Because when alcohol gets into the bloodstream, the liver says, oh, and it tends to constrict the blood flow through the liver. So Antranex dilates that portal vein, keeping it open to get it flushed out, or it has the ability to send more of this toxic or chemical material over to the kidneys. So it works. So there's your kind of your three things to look for: your B vitamin range, your endocrine part with the thyroid and anxiety and depression, and then your liver. support. Now, of course, you could use other things. You could use Livco, but Antronex is your key player with that. But
And the uncontrolled urination at night, even when asleep.
well, but that's the B vitamin is going to help that, because it's going to bring more nerve flow back into that tissue, back into the bladder. Remember, B4 is the vitamin of tonification. So when you lose nerve flow and the right nerve conduction, what happens to that tissue? It fatigues. It just relaxes. Well, you don't want your bladder relaxing at night, because you're just going to keep going. You want it to hold the fluid in there, not relax and say, I got to go again. I got to go again. I got to go again. Now, if this is a particular individual and they're a male, then more than likely they also have a swollen prostate. If it's a female, more than likely their uterus they have a tipped uterus, or the uterus is collapsed on the bladder, which again relates to nerve conduction, nerve flow. So same with intestinal tract, people that get diverticulosis, which is a terrible disease. If you get inflamed, I mean, you can die of it. And that bulging is a B vitamin, is also a loss of tone in the collagen, but it's a loss of neurological character. So a lot of these B vitamins, that's why in what I gave you here, when Lee talks about, was it cataplex? Where did he say? Waterlogged tissues. Where did he say? Weakness of stamina. Yeah, poor muscular tonicity. Yes. Excess lactic acid. And where does he talk about the, I think maybe
Edema?
it's the edema. It's all waterlogged because that's because the heart isn't functioning. But yeah, tenderness in the cat. Oh, that's lactic acid. But maybe it's the G. But yeah, but the electrical, that's why what we talked about the last 3 times with me is cataplex B4 is the key supplement to keep us tonified and relaxed, to keep that balance between that tonification and relaxation. That's why if you don't have enough tone, you want to use B, right? If you get the person that is very, where's my, oops, sorry. Where did I see that? I thought I had a graph here of that. Oh, it was the very first one. Hold on here. Yeah, you get a person like this. This is phosphorus and B. This is potassium and G. See it? This is very poor tone. This is your type A personality. This is your very slow, forgetful.
Right.
Can't get out of their own way. This person will knock you over. This person can't even get up to get near you, you know? So there's your 2. But with the mineral goes the vitamin. So this is B and phosphorus, G and potassium. Now, please, everyone, when you quote me, it's not 100%, but I'm telling you, it's pretty close to 100%. And you can have people in between. You can have people fluctuating back and forth, but usually with most people, you know, you will, you'll see that, the, they'll be predominantly one way or the other. So in the case, I mean, this is a great question, actually. So the person with the bladder is, let me go all the way to the end of phosphorus. So we say these are the people with really poor tonification. Well, let's see what Lee said about it. You know, this is the person that excessive secretions, right? There it is, where you need the phosphorus. You need that, you need the tonification of the B, but you also need the phosphorus, the mineral that goes with this. This is the person that's too sluggish, not the person that's too intense. The person that's too intense, you can't be running and urinate at the same time. You can't do it.
Right.
You know, so this is the person that it just, you know, they're just too sluggish, you know. So slow starters, they're sensitive to cold, you know. Anyway, but it's a good question.
You have time for one more, Joseph?
Sure, one more, yeah.
This is Barbara from New York City, psychiatrist. So I have this 66-year-old man, former alcoholic with cirrhosis, very skinny. He has eczema on 3/4 of his body. He has dry eye, which he uses drops for. He has glaucoma, which he hadn't been using his medicine for a year. He's got awful swelling, weeping wounds of his legs, and he has a tremor. He can't write. He used to fall, but his neurological is getting better. And the other day, he had an exacerbation where he was partially blind in his good eye. His bad eye hardly sees anything. We went to the emergency room. He thought he had detached retina and it was an emergency, but it turned out to be something with his sclera. I don't know exactly what it was, but he's okay now. That his one eye is okay. But I wanted to know, what would you recommend as a starting point for this man? I know he's got a lot of problems.
Well, yeah, so what you have to do is go to the lecture I gave on how to create a protocol and just listen to that for an hour, the first hour. And what you want to do is each one of these symptoms, you look it up in my book and you take the first supplement. So he's got about 5 to 7 issues.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, the first being his liver now is shot. So you would go to cirrhosis of the liver. Okay, hepatrophin. That would be so you'd make up a protocol addressing each of these symptoms to start with. And just take the first product in the protocol, because that's the way I made these for these different symptoms. Is these are prioritized. So if you've got bradycardia, slow heartbeat, phosphate liquid. So you're going to have him, put him on, he's probably on 10 medications. So you're going to have to see how many products is he willing to take, and you have the dosages there. So that's what I would do. I mean, you know, we could take time some other time, but you can do it yourself. Just look up each of those things that you said. So like for his eyes at the end, just give him Iplex. That's a nice formulation. You know, it's not high dosages that he probably, you know, if that's all he had, you could do them separately. But the 4 products that are in there, but you could give him Iplex. That would be a good product to start with him. You know, hepatrophin for the liver. So, okay.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So it's Constance. Could she use a symptom survey to get some better control of this?
Well, the symptom survey, yes, would certainly give you a picture, but you know what, Constance, this guy, just listening to that case,
yeah,
you'd have to give him everything. So, but you could give him that and just have him put 3s in those boxes, because he's going to fill out every box with a 1 or a 2. So to use the symptom survey form in that case, I would just do 3s. And you're going to see he's most predominant, more than likely, in the liver. But you could do that and then put him on the program for a while, you know, 6 weeks, have him fill out another one and see how you're doing. Or you could run a heart graph on him and then check him in 6 weeks, see if his heart is better. How is the liver influencing the heart? How is the nervous system obviously, affecting, his heart? So all of those things would be important. But someone like this, you would use more formulations like iPlex, Cardio Plus, other things. So you're giving him these ranges of supplements, maybe Livaplex instead of just Hepatrophin, which Hepatrophin is in there. So that's where a person like this, I only have 3 products. You got to try to get as much nutrient into the system. This guy's been starving to death for 20 years, 30
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
So
Thanks.
you're welcome.
Joseph, I also
Yep.
wanted to comment that I thought you hit the nail right on the head on that the alcoholic that was having nighttime incontinence, that if the nutritional things didn't help within about a month, to send him to a bladder specialist and have him do a post-voiding residual when you'd mentioned that he might be having not emptying because of the prostate.
Yes, right. When you have someone like that, that's if a man is urinating more than 3 times a night, there's something else going on. Either he has an infection, he has a swollen prostate, or
Yes, I
there might be
agree.
other things. Yeah, for sure. And they should be looked at by a urologist for sure,
Yes.
to make sure there's not a possibility of cancer, of even bladder cancer, or other things going on there for sure.
Right, but we
But-
did those pretty frequently in the hospital, and it was amazing how much would be retained that the person didn't realize.
Oh yes, men with prostate issues.
Right.
In fact, I know a personal friend of mine, he wouldn't go in and he ended up with a terrible kidney infection. The infection, because of his prostate, backed up into the bladder, backed up into the
Yes.
kidneys. The guy was a mess. He almost died. He did live, but and then
Yes, I
the
can see that.
infection then, we're going on here, but the infection then went into his spine,
Ooh,
This guy, it was a miracle. He's still alive. He made it through.
huh.
Yeah. So yes, these things that people have, if you don't see a change, then you need more help. You need more eyes on it to see what else it could be, especially if you're applying nutrition. You've got to know what you're working with. That's why I had you all watch that video. I hope everybody watches that video. I've watched it 10 times
Yeah,
since
that
I
was
found
excellent. Yeah.
it. Because with the heart sound recorder, it just helps you. Oh, that's what Joe's talking about. Or I'm saying, oh, I did get that right. Oh, I did teach that right. Oh, yes. And of course, I'll have my medical checker, Ray. If I speak with her, she always says, good. Well, Joe, you could tweak that or understand this a little better. So, we're all learning. I'm not a cardiologist, but, you have to know what you're working with. You have to see the body. And so
Yes.
that's why what Constance says about the symptom survey form and the heart sound recorder, these are our tools. If you're a muscle tester, blood work, we have to find out what tissue is involved. Then we have to figure out how we can apply nutrition to improve the function and quality, circulation, influence to that tissue. Well, thank you all very much. This has been, I've enjoyed this so much. And, no question is a bad question. And certainly, we all have our challenges, frustrations in our working with people and understanding, standard process is another whole language. And so it takes a long time to understand it and why Standard does what they do. But the main thing is we are honoring and trusting nature and how nature works in relationship to the human function and the human body itself. So great to be with you all.
Blessings.
Thank you. Blessings to all of
Thank
you.
you,
And
Joseph.
you're
Thank you
welcome.
so
I'll
much.
talk to you next Tuesday.